What's up, everyone, and welcome in to Your Celtics Source, where LeBron James is robbing the Lakers blind to 52 million. Austin Reaves is opting out faster than a Red Sox fan in the eighth inning at Fenway Park, and the C's, well, they're trying to duck the second apron like a pothole on Comab. But we're going to get into all of that. We're going to talk about Al Horford. We're going to talk about Luke Kornet, but I want to start with the NBA draft and just sort of the drama around it. Specifically Ace Bailey, right? Ace Bailey, he told teams. Well, first of all, he didn't work out for any team, right? He's the only top 10 player that didn't work out for any teams. Obviously, you have highlights and whatever from him in college, right? So it's not like nobody's seen him. Everyone's seen how he plays, but still, it's sort of a bad look to just not work out for any team. Um, and then he specifically told the Utah Jazz that he didn't want to be drafted by them, right? And I understand that, right? It's not about, the Jazz being a bad team because when you're a top lottery pick like he is, you're going to go most likely to a bad team unless you're, uh, you know, Cooper Flag somehow, landing with the Mavs who are, ready to win now, probably one of the favorites to win the title this coming year. But it wasn't, about the how bad the Jazz were. It was more about, he wants to be on the East Coast because he was fine going to Washington, Charlotte, which are, just as bad as the Jazz, maybe even worse, right? Who knows? Especially in the Eastern Conference, right? The Jazz, obviously, in the much harder Western Conference. So maybe if they were in the Eastern Conference, they would have won a couple more games. But I understand that, right? All the action is on the East Coast. You don't really want to be out in the middle of nowhere with Utah. But Utah, it's actually a great place for a guy like him to land because he's going to get the ball in his hands. They're going to develop him, you know, basically they're going to develop the team around him because he'll be really the only option, right? And he's very, he has a high upside, but definitely he is raw and needs to be developed. And, having that much um, sort of, I would say, freedom to do what you want because you're the number one guy on that team. I think it's huge for a young player trying to be developed, right? Obviously, Cooper Flag is, a generational talent, but, he's not going to get the ball in his hands 24/7 like an Ace Bailey would on the Jazz because you have, obviously Kyrie is injured right now, but you have a lot of veteran guys. You have Anthony Davis, who plays a very similar, kind of game that Cooper does, right? Obviously, Cooper, is a little bit better of a shooter and he's more of a, point guard than a center, but he's definitely a tall forward that does a lot of his work in the paint, floaters and sort of high flying sort of NBA offense, which is what AD does. So, right, you're going to have to split time with that. You're going to have to split time with, all the centers and all the guards that the Mavs already have, which is one disadvantage to going to a team like that. But if you're Ace Bailey, like it's one thing to be upset, but you cannot dwell on it, right? You want your contract. If you want to play, you're going to this team, so may as well suck it up. Don't complain about it. Go, basically, try your best. Don't complain about it. Put on your best work, and eventually you're going to, if you really want, 4 or 5 years, you're going to move on to another team. If you don't want to sign a contract extension with the Jazz, which maybe by then he'll actually enjoy it. Maybe he'll want to stay. But it's not like you can just ask to go to a different team. Like if he wants to play in the NBA, he's going to the Jazz. Um, and you have to give a lot of credit to Austin Ainge. The audacity to draft him despite him, openly not wanting to come there. Right? Obviously, it's Austin Ainge's first, you know, um, time as like the head GM, right, coming over from the Celtics. Um, but I give a lot of credit to him for trying to, you know, basically take the best player still on the market or still on the board at that time at pick number 5, despite all the controversy around it. Um, but I'm going to move on to the Lakers. Right, LeBron James, he opts into his $52.6 million contract extension. Uh, you know, LeBron James, I he could really play. If he really, really wanted to, he could really play. 5, 6 more years if he really wanted to, assuming no injuries or whatever. Right, at a steady decline, obviously. Right, he's not going to be what he is right now in 5 years, and you can already see right he doesn't play full on defense. He saves his energy for moments. You know, on the offensive end, right? Sometimes you see, right, in the fourth quarters, he gets tired and, sort of the offense collapse, right? So the JJ Redick, who I think did a great job, by the way, for his first year as a head coach, right? Obviously, they fell short. I think that was mostly because they just didn't have a center, right? The Lakers, they know that's their number one priority. Go out and get a center. After that, Mark Williams trade fell through at the trade deadline. But I really think if you're the Lakers, everyone knows, by the way, that you're going out to get a center, so it's not going to be easy. Right? Obviously, we'll talk about who they could sign in free agency. Right? Obviously, the Celtics have 2 centers on who will be going to free agency, so maybe they would draft one, or they would sign one. But if you're LeBron James, how much longer do you really want to play, right? Obviously, the team is, building around Luka, not building around you, and you're still a key part of it at the moment. But all the players that they bring in are for Luka's type of offense, not yours, which you can still contribute, but you're not going to be the main guy in, right? And he knows that he's not being as high maintenance as he used to be. Obviously, right? He has demanded a lot from GMs and whatever. And now he realizes, he's at the end of his career. It's time for him to, hand the keys over to Luka. But right, I don't know if he wants to play 4 or 5 years. Right, obviously he's going to play this year. I don't know if he'll play another year. This could be his last year. I think he wants to end on a high note. Um, Obviously, if you go to the NBA Finals, that's a easy high note. But I don't know if the Lakers are right there. I probably have at least 4 teams ahead of them in the West. Yeah, I'm probably going to take the Thunder, Mavs, Rockets all above them. Maybe I'd have this team 4th in the West right now. But why would you keep playing, right? You've done everything you're gonna do. You can do for this league, right? There are already young stars that have basically taken over everyone's eyes. Anthony Edwards, Tatum, even obviously Shea, and Brown, and other young stars. Tyrese Halliburton. Just unfortunate, all these Achilles injuries, by the way. Um, but I think, if you're LeBron, I think this should be your last year. And then, you can still be a celeb around the game if you want, or you can go and live your own life, stay away from the game, and just show up for, big events. But I still think, I think I would wrap it up after this season, just because, you know, what else are you going to do? You're just risking, long-term injury at this point. Obviously, he thinks maybe he can win one more championship, but if you can't win it this year, I would hang up the keys, and sit back, enjoy the rest of your life, watch your son, who obviously at the moment, right, it was just his rookie year, and he did show some signs of key offense. He's a great defender. I think he needs to work on just getting more consistent on the offensive end, and he made huge improvements this season, right? Obviously, at the start of the season, he looked like he couldn't even last a minute on the court, and then at the end of the season, he was handling the offense extremely well. So watch your son develop. sit back, enjoy the rest of your life, and not worry about continuing to play. Obviously, he's going into a record-breaking 23rd year in the league. Um, but I'm gonna move on to the Celtics here. Austin Reaves, obviously he's opt out. This was sort of expected, right? He's going to renegotiate for a larger contract. Other moves, right? Julius Randle signs I think it was like $152 million contract, something like that. I'm not exactly sure on the exact money for 3 years, something like that. Maybe it wasn't 150. Maybe it was like in the hundreds, maybe 108, something like that. But he signs one. A lot of other players, not any big stars renegotiating contracts, despite besides LeBron James. Some minor contracts around the edge. A lot of players going to free agency, including Luke Kornet and Al Horford. And I have two different opinions on both these players. Right, Luke Kornet, he is a starting caliber center on some teams, right? And he could definitely start for the Celtics. And the Celtics are in need of a center, right? Obviously, they drafted Amari Williams, but Amari Williams is not ready to play in the NBA by any stretch, right? I don't even know if he's going to make it out of G League before getting cut or spring training, right? He might not even go to the G League. He might just get cut. We'll see how he performs in summer league, but obviously that is not any indication of how he's going to perform in spring training or in the G League or in the NBA when he gets there. Same with Max Scholga. But, going into next season, assuming that Amari Williams is, at least starting in the G League, right? He's not on the actual team. You only have two centers, Neemias Queta and Xavier Tillman, who I think Luke Kornet is twice as good as both of them, right? He right he opted in for one more year last season coming into the season, and then he had a great season, and obviously he could go out and sign for like $15 million, something like that, right? That would be a perfect center to put on with Luka Doncic in the Lakers. Obviously he's not you know you know a super high lob threat, right? That's not his type of game, obviously. Obviously, the Celtics didn't need that. They didn't play that kind of way. But, he could develop that, right? He has the skills for sure to be a lob threat. And he's a great, he's he was pretty great defensively this year as well, right? Obviously, he struggles a little bit out on the perimeter, as, most centers do, at least, tall, lengthy centers that are not, though that are over 7 feet tall, right? Skinny and tall centers, they struggle guarding the quick guards on the perimeter. But that would be a perfect center for the Lakers to go out, especially because the Celtics they are maybe $6-7 million under the cap luxury tax, the second apron, right? And obviously, I think that they're not done for the season for the offseason. They're going to make some more moves. I think they probably will get rid of George Niang somehow. Maybe they'll keep Anthony Simmons. I actually like Anthony Simmons. We talked about this on an earlier video, but I like the offense that he brings. Obviously, he does need the ball in his hands, which is going to take away from Brown and White. So I don't know how that works as like a culture fit or whatever. But he definitely has the offense to sort of make up for Drew, and obviously he doesn't have the defense at the moment. But he can get a little bit better, and I think the Celtics will be able to hide him a little bit better. But he definitely has a much better offensive game than Drew did, especially at this stage in Drew's career, right? And I feel bad for Drew, obviously, going to a team that I don't think is quite ready to contend, despite making such a aggressive move. I'm not sure why you do this if you are the Trailblazers, because you still are like a 12th team in the West at best, right? But as for the Celtics, right, the perfect guy to keep is if you could get Al Horford on a veteran minimum for like $5 million, something like that, right? And obviously he's not going to be nearly as productive as Luke is, given his age, but I also think he is not going to want to take a $5 million extension. Maybe he would to finish out his career in Boston. He's probably going to the Hall of Fame. Maybe he wants, just to finish out his career, you know, with a team that he's been with for so long, and he would, take a small contract just to stay with the team. But if I'm Al Horford and I know that this team is not going to be contending for a championship next year, why would I, want to stay here when I could go, get a big salary, finish out my career somewhere, warm, maybe down, in Florida, maybe Miami would be good. Obviously he's from around there. That's where he went to school. But, you know, right, maybe he goes there, maybe he goes somewhere, another place. But, like, you know, he has to decide whether he loves Boston enough to take a tiny contract and finish out his career, or he just wants to get the big salary as, a guy like him. Obviously, he's not worth the salary anymore, but like when you're a veteran that's been in the league for so long and you win a championship and you mean so much to any team you're on, you deserve that kind of contract, right? Same with LeBron, same with Kevin Durant, right? LeBron James definitely not worth $52 million a year, for sure, right? He is nowhere near as productive as a Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum when he was healthy. Right now, right? Obviously, he's making just a little bit more than they are, um, or maybe just less. I think Brown is making 55, Tatum making 56. But obviously, when you've had that kind of career, you get to make that kind of money despite you maybe not being worth it, productively. So that's the same with Al Horford, right? Maybe he takes like a 15, $20 million, maybe 1 or 2 more years, right? And we'll have to see, right? I think it's going to be, up to the Celtics to convince him to, try and stay in Boston, right? Obviously, he'll have to decide whether he wants to stay in Boston for 2, 3 more years. But my guess is he's probably going to look somewhere else, which is unfortunate because the Celtics could need any kind of center depth they can get, even if it's only for 12, 13, 14 minutes a night. You need some sort of thing to take a little bit away from from Neemias Queta, from a Xavier Tillman, from Amari Williams, especially if you can't get Luke Kornet. And Luke Kornet's the harder one because Luke Kornet, right? Obviously, he wins a championship, but he's not. This town does not mean as much as it does mean for Al Horford because he's played for a multitude of other teams, and he wasn't part of I would say, the culture and bringing up Jason Tatum, bringing up Jaylen Brown. So I don't know if he wants to finish out his career here, and obviously he could be so productive. He could go out and win another championship with some teams that are only a center away. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow on social media. Obviously, you can listen to the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. We will be live throughout the summer with any breaking news and covering, summer league, free agency, all of that, which starts tomorrow. So we could be live again tomorrow night if the Celtics make a big move, or maybe the Luke or Al sign somewhere else. We're gonna talk about that. At the moment, I don't have any scheduled live streams coming up just because I don't know what's gonna happen. It's gonna be more on a day-to-day basis based on what goes on, and obviously if there's any breaking news, we will go live that night to talk about it. But yeah, follow on social media, and until next time, go Celtics.
It's over. Time to say it again, Boston. Anything's possible. Banner number 18 has been secured.